You're listening to the Niners Bros, your home for post-game analysis, correcting media narratives, and keeping you up to date on all things San Francisco 49ers. What's up, guys? I'm Michael Ditchfield.
And I'm David Ditchfield, and we are the Niners Bros. On today's episode, we break down the 49ers' 37-15 shellacking of the Carolina Panthers, and head coach for the Panthers, Matt Rhule, is now unemployed.
And so is the defensive coordinator for the Panthers, Phil Snow. So anytime you can go on the road and get the opposing head coach and defensive coordinator fired, that's generally a good sign.
Yeah, and we don't want to be too flippant about it. Of course, Matt Rhule's a real person, and I'm sure his kids don't want to answer questions about their dad getting fired at school today, but he is still owed over $40 million by the Panthers. And now he doesn't have to come into work at 6 a.m. to game plan for Aaron Donald and the Rams. So there's that.
Yeah, there's worse ways to make a living, that's for sure. And I'm sure he can cry all the way to the bank while he's on the golf course. And,
I will say we don't want to be too boastful or gloating, but if you listen to our last podcast, the breakdown of the Rams game, in the last minute as we previewed this game, I did say that the 49ers defense might leave the Panthers with an interim head coach this week. And that's indeed what happened. So overall, a great team win for the 49ers. Let's get into some of the storylines coming in as we usually do. For the 49ers, injuries again coming in, and how are you going to account for Christian McCaffrey without Javon Kinlaw or Eric Armstead? And then questions about Kinlaw and his usage too. He had not been getting the ball much. For the Panthers, a lot of concern about Matt Rhule and that 32nd ranked offense coming in. Would they be able to score enough points against this vaunted defense?
And, it would be really nice if we didn't have to spend so much time every week talking about the injuries. This team just feels straight up cursed. I've never seen anything like it. You said injuries were an issue coming into the game. And, of course, now after the game, devastating news. Emmanuel Mosley, the cornerback, is done for the year with an ACL. Nick Bosa has a groin strain. Not sure how much time he's going to miss. Jimmy Ward has missed most of the season so far, came back, and on the very first play of the game, breaks his hand. He's going to have surgery and is going to be missing time. Robbie Gould had several tackles. Yeah, he had a couple of tackles in this game, which is generally not a good thing. The 49ers are going to be working out some kickers on Wednesday. Not sure if Gould is going to miss time either, but every week it just seems like the injuries just keep coming. We've already lost our starting quarterback, Trey Lance. We've lost our starting running back. We've lost our starting left tackle. Starting safety has missed most of the year. Sam linebacker. These are not special teams guys that are on the field for a few plays every now and then. These are really serious injuries.
Yeah, the 49ers came into this game with the second most injuries in terms of starters missing time and things like that. Some of the graphs that were up, and now more losses just piling on. So fortunately, they do come out with a win in this one. And let's get into the drive-by-drive like we usually do. If you didn't get to watch the game, or even if you did and you want to relive it, we're just going to talk about how this game sort of unfolded. So right off the bat, George Kittle did get involved early with 2 catches on the opening drive for the 49ers, which was nice to see. And then Jeff Wilson ripped off a 41-yard run where, again, it was like the Red Sea parting and just nobody between him and the one safety to beat. He did beat him to the outside. Didn't make it all the way. I think Elijah Mitchell is scoring on that, but still 41 yards, a new career high after last week's career high. If he does that every week, a new career high.
Yeah, we're going to be in great shape.
I think so. Yeah, but nice to get a touchdown on the first drive, and that's something that Carolina, for all their struggles, had not been giving up opening drive touchdowns. Of course, it went to Tevin Coleman. Duh.
Yeah, of course, because Tevin Coleman loves playing the Panthers. A couple of years ago, he had a monster game against the Panthers where he had 4 rushing touchdowns. Of course, in this game, had a receiving and a rushing touchdown, which I think everybody was probably starting him on their fantasy teams.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
If you're in like a 30-team league or something like that. But after that, Carolina's opening drive, they go 3 and out with a pass breakup by Mooney Ward. He's someone that you just keep talking about as you do drive-by-drive analysis because he affected so many plays. 4 pass breakups in this game. Can we talk for a minute about the decision to sign him for $13 million a year instead of going after J.C. Jackson or Steph Gilmore, even though Steph Gilmore has been good?
Yeah, and the 49ers couldn't have gotten off to a better start. Touchdown, and then your defense goes 3 and out. Charvarius Mooney Ward has been everything the 49ers could have expected and so much more. Like you said, 4 pass breakups in this game alone. He has been phenomenal. Just shut down corner, absolutely. The entire season, it's been so great to watch.
I would argue that his play on defense this year has been similar to Bosa's in that it changes what we can do on defense. Just having him out there and knowing that he does not need help, it changes whether we can blitz or not, whether we need 2 safeties in the back or 1. It's just been really remarkable. But anyway, on the next San Francisco drive, Kittle gets involved with 2 more catches, but he fumbles.
Yeah, and, happy birthday, George. Great to see him getting involved in the game plan. Unfortunately, that fumble there, not ideal. Ultimately, the Panthers were not able to turn that into points, so...
Yeah, they missed a field goal, which we've been doing plenty of, but we'll talk about that later. On the next drive for the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo made probably the best throw of his career. My jaw hit the floor. I know yours did too, but pressure all day. The Panthers really did try. They know that Jimmy gets rid of the ball quick. Everyone knows the word is out, and they brought blitzes. Sometimes there were free rushers, and he managed to just turn in time before he got his head taken off and threw just a gorgeous pass down the sideline to Tevin Coleman. It was a 30-yard gain, but probably traveled closer to 40 air yards, and I couldn't believe it when it happened.
And Jimmy Garoppolo may not be durable, but I don't think anybody can question his toughness. He will stand in there and take a shot and make a throw. He's not always bombing the ball way down the field, but in this case, I think maybe the only person more surprised than us to see that throw was the defensive back covering Tevin Coleman. First off, that ball was even thrown, and second, that he came down with it. It was really tight coverage. He obviously never got his head around, but really tight coverage. Tevin made a really great grab to come down with that ball.
And he said after the game that the ball was not even supposed to go to him, that if a linebacker goes out, then it's an option. But if a corner stays out on him, that's not the read. So Gunslinger Jimmy is not the Jimmy Garoppolo we know or we're prepared for in this game.
The G is for Gunslinger, Jimmy G.
Okay. We'll see if that goes viral and gets going on Twitter. I don't think it's going to. But anyway, that drive did stall out a little bit after kind of a flag for an eligible man downfield, and then Jalen Moore gave up a sack, as you would expect in any game where Jalen Moore plays. It could have been worse, but the drive does stall out.
Yeah, he did okay, and the entire offensive line did okay. This was definitely a regression for them. Not quite as sharp as we've seen them. Definitely penalized a few times. Not quite as good as we've seen in the last few weeks.
But nice after the turnover on the second drive for them to come right back and score to make it 10-0 on that third drive. For the Panthers, they had, they get the ball back, and we were a little displeased with a penalty that was called on, or not a penalty, but a penalty that should have been called on Mooney Ward, where Robbie Anderson had a 31-yard gain, and we thought, how did he get separation at the last minute? Like, Ward has been so good, and then we found out why.
Yeah, that was the one play that he basically gave up, and he was with Robbie Anderson the entire way until right at the last second, where he suddenly lost a step and couldn't figure out why that happened. On the replay, you got to give Robbie Anderson credit. That might be the slickest OPI I've ever seen. He absolutely created separation there, but it was really subtle, and so the refs didn't see it, and he definitely got away with one there, but that's really the only time all season that Mooney has even given up a big-time play.
And if you were not watching live, it's very unlikely that you would have seen the highlight of this, or at least the slow-motion replay of it, but I'll describe it to you. Basically, it's like what Kittle did in the Super Bowl, where he got called for that flag at the end of the first half if Kittle had pushed more. But it should have been OPI in our opinion. But it doesn't end up hurting the 49ers too much. They do march down and kick a field goal. Hufanga actually had a sack earlier in that drive, but it wasn't like a 10-yard loss. It was just sort of like a Baker scrambling to get back to the line, and Hufanga was the nearest man. But after that, both quarterbacks were in a bit of a groove, some good throws early on, but they did kind of trade punts a little bit. The 49ers finally got another drive going, but they had another field goal that was blocked, and this is a recurring problem for the 49ers.
And the 49ers actually had 2 kicks blocked in this game. One of them was an extra point. Mitch Wishnowsky was called in for kicker duty after Gold exited the game with a knee injury after one of his tackles. And
that's never good when the kicker is involved in
multiple tackles.
So we're going to get to that. But.
So, yeah, Wishnowsky, of course, came in and snap hooked his first attempt. That was like, who was it? Was it Chase McLaughlin that a couple of years ago where he had one that he just absolutely kicked it basically like off the screen. So that's what Wishnowsky did in his first attempt. His second attempt, which was an actual PAT, he was going to snap hook it again and actually got an assist. This one was blocked. He was going to snap hook it again. This one was blocked so hard, he actually altered the trajectory of the ball.
Redirected it.
Yeah, redirected through the goalpost.
The commentators were so funny about that too. They said, it goes through the ball. He manages to persevere. It's like, oh, no. He redirected that back in line to where it actually was good. But
yeah, I feel like the Panthers should have gotten like at least a half a point for that or something.
They would take it. Anyway, a blocked field goal, but fortunately, this one at least wasn't returned for 7 like in previous weeks. Coming out of that, Emmanuel Moseley gets a pick 6 off of Baker Mayfield, and you called this.
I did, and I have no way to prove that, but about 6 or 7 seconds before that play started, I said Baker's going to throw a pick 6 here. Didn't know to whom, but it was nice to see Emmanuel Moseley in the right place at the right time, and then capitalizes, gets that great return for a touchdown, and gets the Niners to that infamous 17-point mark.
Yep, and we talked about that, just that under Matt Rhule, when people score 17 points against the Carolina Panthers, or when they score more than 17, generally they win, which is a lot of why he is not, he's not on his sofa today because he couldn't develop Teddy Bridgewater or because he couldn't fix Sam Darnold or make a star out of Baker Mayfield. He's sitting on his couch because this is a team that you cannot win by scoring 17 points in the NFL. So when you go up 17 in that first half as the 49ers, you're feeling pretty good about this, that the Panthers are not going to be able to mount some kind of magical comeback.
Yeah, I think what's the number? The Panthers have won like one game when their opponents have scored 17 or more. So
yeah,
feeling good definitely with 17 at the half.
17 at the half, 17-3, so a 2-touchdown lead. And Jimmy Garoppolo was good in the first half. He was 11 of 18 for 136 and a touchdown. Wilson, 7 carries for 49 yards. So feeling pretty good coming out of halftime. Carolina gets a big return out to the 50, and they put together their best drive overall. There were some incompletions from Baker Mayfield, but McCaffrey ultimately gets a 19-yard touchdown. Hufanga missed him in the open field, but so do a lot of great players in the NFL.
Yeah, and this wasn't Hufanga's best game. We've been singing his praises basically every week as he makes one spectacular play after another. He definitely missed a few in this game. Nothing too crazy. This is the NFL. You're going to have bad games, but Christian McCaffrey is definitely one of those special players. Just like there's only one Deebo Samuel, there's really only one Christian McCaffrey when he's healthy. And certainly one of those guys that's really, really difficult to bring down in the open field. Deebo is more of a tackle breaker, whereas McCaffrey is more of a make you miss completely and break your ankles kind of a guy.
Sure. 49ers come right back after that, and they have a pretty horrible sequence. As a fan, you're just kind of pulling your hair out, where Danny Gray is targeted on a deep shot, and it's just not even close, again, which is a recurring theme. I'd like to talk about that for a minute, but right after that, they announced that Bosa is hurt with the groin and may not return, and then Kittle on a false start. It was more of like a false running start. He was like 20 yards up the field on it. Like, if you ever watched that Indiana Jones movie with River Phoenix, where it's like when Indiana Jones is young and he's with his troop of scouts and they're out in the desert and he comes out of a cave and everyone's gone and he says, "Oh no, everyone's lost but me." That was Kittle on that play. Like he thought that everyone else should have been going and he was the only one.
That was pretty bad. Definitely the walk of shame. He's 10 or 12 yards downfield and the rest of the team is still at the line of scrimmage. So if you were wondering who is to blame on that one,
I don't think the refs had to confer on that one.
No.
But ultimately, there was a PI on a 4th down that kind of bailed the 49ers out there. It was called on C.J. Henderson, on Deebo, on this throw to the outside, where I was, frankly, anytime Jimmy throws to the outside, I'm a little worried it's coming back for a pick. But no, they managed to keep the drive going, and then Jennings goes like Super Mario Star mode, where defenders are just where defenders are just bouncing off of him. 32-yard gain. Just super impressive.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite players on the team. He is one of those guys that is a dog and he loves the game of football. I remember seeing some of his interviews right after he got drafted, and he was just so excited to be part of the 49ers and to get going on this team. He is an aggressive blocker, sometimes too aggressive, but right up to the borderline of what is considered acceptable physicality in the blocking game. He does have a tendency to kind of double catch or double clutch on some of these passes, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as you are securing the ball.
And he was huge on third down in this game.
He's a weapon on third down. We definitely saw that trend happening last year and continuing into this year. That's a guy that Garoppolo trusts on third down. He is looking to Jennings on third down.
Sure. And speaking of Garoppolo, it was nice to see what we've all been looking forward to as 49ers fans, a dual threat quarterback as Garoppolo runs it in for a score there on a scramble. It does get called back, though, with offsetting penalties. Still, right after that, he throws a dart to Debo to go up 24-9. This game feels pretty well in hand. Carolina did get, right after that, a return right back out to the 50, and Robbie Gould gets shoved to the ground like the middle schooler on the playground and injures his knee. Right after that, Diamador Lenore gets burned for a 31-yard gain, but here come our leaders. Mooney Ward with another pass breakup, Warner with a sack, and they have to settle for a field goal.
And the defense, once again, was outstanding in this game. Last week, they finished with 7 sacks. This week, they come up with 6. Fred Warner, as you mentioned, had that sack. Hufanga had a sack. Flanagan Fowles had a sack. Gibson and Burks actually split one.
Mm-hmm.
Omenahu had a sack and led the team in pressures. He's been really, really good. Hard to believe that the Texans just didn't want this guy. But, sometimes a fresh start is what you need, and pretty much anybody is going to be better under the tutelage of Chris Kasarik. So Drake Jackson, of course, finished with a sack as well to round out that group. 6 sacks this week after 7 last week. That's pretty good.
Just super impressive. And Carolina is still technically in the game at that point. They're down 24-12, I believe. But San Francisco kept the pedal to the metal. They put together a 12-play drive right after that, which you just love to see, including 3 straight third down conversions from Jimmy, where it wasn't just a third down like in 3 or 3rd and 4. There were 3 straight third down conversions where he converted from 8+. So just super impressive stuff from Jimmy. And then Wilson got a 16-yard run all the way down to the 1-yard line. I know one of our issues with Wilson, we appreciate him, but he seems to get one big run early and then a bunch of 2-yard runs, and it really augments his yards per carry. It was nice to see him actually finish the game a little bit stronger and have a nice 16-yard run to the 1 and then punch it in on the next play to make it 30-12.
Yeah, he finished 17 carries for 120 yards and did get rewarded with that goal line touch, punched it in for a score. Jimmy, of course, was 18 of 30 for 253 and 2 passing touchdowns. He had a 109.4 quarterback rating. If that's a stat that you're into, I know a lot of people are not, but I think that was certainly his best game of the year. He had a couple of inadvisable, shall we say, throws.
Sure.
He had one over the middle to Debo that just wasn't really close to anybody. Had a couple of throws in traffic, but he had a bunch of really, really nice throws in this game as well. He had a really great throw, actually, in the back of the end zone to Debo. Debo kind of hesitated as he was running towards that ball. Didn't make a great effort at it. He kind of tried to one-hand catch it. But that was a really tremendous throw. If Debo had caught it, that would have been a great catch. But that was a really nicely thrown ball and certainly could have been catchable.
Yeah. Carolina didn't lie down. They did put together another drive and kick a field goal to make it a 2-score game. Niners ran out some clock and then punted again. It's still 15-30 at this point. And then pretty much the clincher, Carolina had that drive. Drake Jackson had a sack where right before that, unfortunately, Mosley got hurt, which was devastating because you just knew. You
immediately.
You knew this was not like a twist or a sprain. You knew that it was some kind of serious injury. But on 4th down and 9 or 4th and 10 from basically backed up to their 1-yard line, Drake Jackson and really the whole defense, amazing pursuit of Mayfield. It was like he had nowhere to go. Everywhere he turned, there was a 49ers defender trying to grab at him. Drake Jackson gets his 2nd sack, and it's a turnover on downs on the 1, and then Coleman punches it in for his 2nd touchdown.
So I don't know who had Tevin Coleman on their fantasy teams, but yeah.
Maybe you're in a 30-team league. Who knows?
Yeah, so a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown for Tevin Coleman. He finished the game with 8 carries for 23 yards, so nothing special in terms of yards per carry there, but it was interesting to see him actually take the ball outside. He had a couple of 10-yard plus runs, which is kind of that Shanahan staple, right? That outside stretch play where the running back just gets to the edge quicker than the defense and goes untouched to the sideline. And usually, again, that's like a 10 to 12, 10 to 15-yard run.
I'm still stuck on the Coleman thing. Like, I'm just imagining people on their fantasy football waiver wire, like picking him up, thinking like, oh, well, maybe he's going to be the new guy in San Francisco. Sorry, I got a little distracted by that. But anyway, at that point, it's pretty much garbage time. Carolina brings in the backup, PJ Walker. He gets lit up on 2 sacks from blitzes going on, just really pressure. D'Amico Ryans did not let up at all in this game. So as you said, 6 sacks, and that pretty much does it at that point. The 49ers close it out. Just an impressive win overall, but certainly with some mitigating factors, the injuries at the end, just hard to take, but certainly good to see the 49ers win when everyone else in the division lost.
Yeah, and once again, the defense comes up big. They were able to get a lot of pressure, even without Bosa for the majority of this game. Dre Greenlaw led the team in tackles once again with 11. He actually leads the NFL in tackles for those who are keeping track. He did have another bonehead, just like, what are you doing kind of a penalty again, where I believe it was towards the end of the first half where
like the Panthers' final drive before halftime, and they were not going to score, but...
And he's doing that thing where he's trying to rip the ball out really, really late, like almost like borderline unsportsmanlike there. And then right after that, he's trying to grab onto a guy, preventing him from getting back to the line of scrimmage. And it's like, this defense is too good. Like, you do not need to do that. No. So not sure what he was thinking. Definitely a dumb play there. But outside of some of those head-scratching penalties, he's been super for the Niners. Fred Warner was second on the team in tackles with 9. And then Diamador Lenore actually had 8 tackles again this week. I believe he was actually third on the team in tackles last week as well. So great to see him making an impact, not just in coverage, but with those tackles as well.
Sure. It's hard to believe that we're 5 games into this season already. Like I've referenced, it was nice to see the other teams in the NFC West lose. But I think we're at the point now where even if you can't draw final conclusions, we're starting to get a feel for how the draft and the offseason free agent acquisitions and departures, how they're affecting teams. Let's just take a moment and talk about kind of what we're seeing around the league. What are your big takeaways from, we're not quite a third of the way through the season, but we've seen enough to start to draw some conclusions about the pecking order. What's your big takeaway?
Yeah, I don't know what my big takeaway would be, but in terms of maybe unexpected things or surprises, I would say maybe the Giants at 4-1, and really actually the whole NFC East really off to a really strong start. The NFC East used to be the powerhouse division in the conference, and lately they've kind of been a dumpster fire.
Sure.
So you see the Eagles come out. They are undefeated. The Cowboys have not missed a beat with their backup quarterback. Arguably, I mean, can you say that? Are they better without Dak? I don't know.
I won't go there. We'll leave that to Skip Bayless. He's got to be just insufferable right now.
Obviously, the Commanders are the cellar dwellers there, and what a shock, right? Carson Wentz was not able to turn that team around under Ron Rivera's leadership. But yeah, the Cowboys, the Eagles are doing great. And the Giants, again, 4-1 and coming off a win against the Packers. Like, wow.
That was pretty crazy. Yeah. I would say for me, the most surprising thing has just been how many playoff teams from last year or teams that had playoff aspirations have disappointed out of the gate. Green Bay certainly missing Devontae Adams and losing to the Giants is kind of stunning. Cincinnati is 2-3. The Rams are 2-3. And one of my big takeaways from this game was the Panthers looked so much more physical than the Rams. I kept expecting more injuries for the 49ers. They just had such a more physical style of play. The Rams just look finesse. Their offensive line looks completely overmatched. They do not look like threats to repeat. They don't even look like threats to win a wild card spot. Anything can happen, and we'll see. They're always aggressive with draft picks, and maybe they trade for someone like Christian McCaffrey at the deadline. But the Colts too. Matt Ryan looks like the ghost of Matt Ryan. The Broncos with Russell Wilson. They have a head coach who could be one and done, and Russell Wilson is not playing as well as Geno Smith. So that's been the biggest surprise, as we came in thinking this was going to be the most exciting and interesting NFL season ever, with so many teams potentially vying for the spot at the top. And it really seems like it's the Bills the Eagles, and depending on how well Jimmy Garoppolo can play, the 49ers, with the Chiefs trying to manage around some roster deficiencies. But there's not a whole lot of competition at the top in terms of who the elite teams are. I think 5 games in, we pretty much know.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like you said, just kind of average teams. You see the teams that actually have the potential to be more and to be better. And then, there's just a lot of parity right now. There are not a bunch of really elite teams. There are a lot of just these kind of middling teams. The 49ers absolutely should be 5-0 right now.
Oh, sure.
With the teams we've played. But you'll take being in first place alone. As you said, all the other teams in the division did lose this week, so thanks, guys, for that. Always nice to be in first place alone. One thing that, I think we mentioned is the turf, and this is such a huge issue.
Yep.
Kittle really talked about this, and he's been, he's kind of known as a goofy, kind of a carefree sort of a guy. But when it comes to turf, he's made his opinions pretty clear over the years, and came out with
he made a really interesting point, and that is that how bizarre would it be in the NBA if, depending on which city or which stadium you were playing in, if they used a different surface, different wood, different flooring? It's absurd that you have a national football league where the surfaces are different. And I know in baseball, they also have some of this, but in baseball, you have star players like Ronald Acuna Jr. for the Braves, who tore an ACL, out in Miami. He was just kind of jumping for a ball. When he came down, his foot stuck. So it is bizarre that this problem exists, especially in football, which is such a contact sport. It's a shame, and you can't 100% pin that on this Mosley injury, but we've seen the stats. It's over 16% more lower leg injuries on these artificial fields than on grass, and that is a concern going forward. How many other superstars is the league going to lose this year to lower leg injuries?
And as much revenue as the NFL generates, you'd think they would find some way to address this issue, if not completely alleviate it. The NFL does raise awareness for a lot of really great causes, but what I would like to see is a month where
ACL month.
Yeah, where the players can basically raise awareness to, we need to not be playing on turf anymore, artificial turf.
Yeah, that would be something.
Yeah, Goodell, I think Goodell would really love that idea. Everyone email him about that right now.
I'm sure that's what the 49ers are doing at the Greenbrier, other than just getting ready for the Falcons. And before we get into that, I do want to just say for a moment that it'll be interesting to see how D'Amico Ryans compensates for the loss of Emmanuel Mosley. I think we saw Samuel Womack enter the game for him, and Womack was someone who played really well in the slot in preseason, had 2 interceptions, but he could potentially hang on outside.
Yeah, he was really feisty in the preseason, and it seems like Lenore has kind of locked down that slot position, that nickelback role. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Womack get that job. I think there's probably going to be a competition between him and Ambry Thomas. Not sure what kind of progress, if any, Ambry Thomas has been able to make over the offseason.
He came into the game and gave up a catch right away. He gives me Akello Weatherspoon vibes, where Weatherspoon turned into a decent player, but in his early tenure with the 49ers, anytime he was inserted into a game, he immediately gave up catches, and it wasn't like he was way off. They were usually contested, or he was close, but just didn't get his head around in time or things like that. And Ambry Thomas seems to be a bit of a magnet for the ball, where it just always seems to find the guy he's covering, and he's not quite there, other than that huge pick he had against Stafford last year.
Yeah, basically getting us into the playoffs. That was a huge play, and he certainly did improve. But Ambry Thomas was not really somebody that should have been on the field as much as he was last year. Obviously, that was out of necessity due to injuries. Once again, shocker. But it'll be interesting to see, again, if he has progressed, if he's going to get some more playing time. Not sure. Again, Womack has looked really good.
49ers have Jason Verrett coming back allegedly from injury. It doesn't sound like he's going to play in this Falcons game. I think they're kind of building him up. There's no point in bringing him back from a knee injury for him to blow out a hamstring because he's not in shape yet. But I think they're kind of hoping that maybe by the Chiefs game he'll be ready. But that'll be
on turf.
And on turf. Yeah, can we? I don't care how Bosa feels. Can we just hold him out of this Falcons game?
Yeah, please. I mean, we should be able to beat the Falcons without Bosa. Don't push your luck here.
Yeah. I do want to talk to, D'Amico has choices with how to replace him. I have full confidence that he will figure it out. He has been just elite as a defensive coordinator, and good for him. He had one interview for the Vikings job last year, and he didn't pursue it. I think it's a foregone conclusion in the league that he will be getting a job. He will be interviewed for pretty much every opening, and he may have his pick of 2 or 3, and good for him, and good for the 49ers for having Vic Fangio hanging around the building in the offseason, knowing that D'Amico Ryans is not long for this team.
Yeah, it's going to be sad to lose him, but that's just inevitable. Like you said, I think it was a really smart decision of him. I don't know if it was ever officially offered, but I think he wanted to get that experience, right, of interviewing for a head coaching job.
Sure.
So he's been through that process, but the experience that he's getting under his belt right now is going to be invaluable as a head coach. He's probably seen a lot of these other coordinators go on to head coaching gigs, and they just flame out immediately. So good for him for making the smart play, getting some experience, sort of building that resume, those game time decisions, so he doesn't have to do a Hackett and call somebody else in to make those game time decisions for him like the Broncos do. He will absolutely be a head coach next year, and the one nice thing about that is the 49ers will at least get a compensatory draft pick for that, probably a 3rd-round pick.
We seem to be taking more advantage of that program than anyone else in the league, and good for us. I'm sure that D'Amico Ryans will have things cooked up for Marcus Mariota. The Falcons this week are coming off a really gut-wrenching loss to the Bucs, where they were called for the most gentle and delicate roughing the passer penalty in the history of the NFL because it's Tom Brady.
Yeah, 49ers fans are no strangers to BS roughing the passer calls, but that one was special. If there are any Patriots fans listening, which I don't know why you would be listening to a 49ers podcast, but can anybody really stand up and say that, okay, no, Tom Brady is not treated differently than any other quarterback? Is anybody still trying to make that argument? That was the weakest roughing the passer I think I maybe have ever seen in my life. Terrible to just lose a game. So on the other hand, you could say that the Falcons kind of got away with pass interference on the previous play in that drive, but still, boy, that roughing the passer, that was terrible.
We haven't talked about this, but just quick snap decision. Do you think that after the divorce that Tom Brady comes and plays for the 49ers when he's 48 and his kids have blackballed him, they don't want to see him? We'll see. Hopefully by then Trey Lance is healed and figured it out. But it should be a good game against the Falcons. It's always a challenge when you're on the East Coast, on the road, a 1 o'clock start time, so 10 a.m. for our guys. But Mariota has not been terribly impressive. His QBR is inflated by his running numbers, but in this game, he gave up. The Bucs have a similar defense in some ways to us, relentless pass rush, and he was sacked 5 times, threw for 147 yards. And then for their defense, you just hope they come in a little bit worn out. They had to chase after Brady on 52 pass attempts. The Bucs do not really attempt to run the ball, so you wonder if their D-line is going to be gassed, and if they are, let's run and get out of there with a win before we come home to play the Chiefs and the Rams. But so that'll do it for us. Again, he's Michael, I'm David. We are the Niners Bros. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're on Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.